pleased to have Professor Ellen Langer in our session as an invited speaker. Let me briefly introduce Professor Ellen Langer. She graduated from the Department of Chemistry in New York University, and then switched to gear, changed the subject to the social psychology, and got a PhD in Yale University. And then has been working as a professor since 1977. She published more than 200 papers, particularly for social psychology. As you know, my major is decision making, and she published many papers on the social decision making. So that guides me in our research. And she has dubbed as a mother of mindfulness now. And she recently received the honorable awards, particularly the Distinguished Scientist Award and Liberty Science Genius Award, and other many awards. So I think I'm very sure that you will enjoy her talk and learn a lot from her talk. Let's welcome with a big applause.
Good. Hello. I'm used to moving around a lot, so what I'm going to do is start up here, go down there, go up here, and at the end of this, I'll get a lot of exercise, and it's up to you what you get out of it. All right. Now, but how do I make this work? That's how. Some of you were in the session yesterday, and there's going to be a little overlap, so forgive me for that, but I want those of you who don't know anything about me or this work to all come up to the same spot. So to do this, what I need you to do is play along with me for a little while, because I want to give you the feeling of this concept of mindlessness. And the argument is that most of us are mindless almost all of the time. We don't know that we're mindless because when we're not there to know we're not there. But all those many years of research suggest, sadly, that most of us are behaving like robots rather than fully present. So tell me, what do you see when you see this picture? Now, unless you've seen it before, most people don't know what it is. But if I tell you, it's a cow. Now, this is the way life is for virtually all of us. We start off, we have no idea what it is. Somebody then tells us. The problem is, the way we accept that information without questioning it, we become trapped to seeing it only as a cow in this instance. What I'm saying is, if you come back, let's agree, 10 years from now, we'll all meet right here. I'll show you this slide, and what you'll see is that you cannot not see the cow. Now, that's kind of scary when you think that everything you know to be true that you learned before today, you learned in the same way. You learned what it means to be a successful person, a family member, a student. Whatever it is you've learned in a single-minded way rather than in a more mindful way. Play along some more. I'm going to show you numbers, and I want you to add them out loud with me, okay? 1,000. Come on. 1,040. I can't hear you. 2,040. 2,070. 3,070. 3,090. 4,090. Okay, now I don't know how they teach arithmetic in Korea. In the United States, if you take 4,090 and you add 10, you typically get 4,100, not 5,000. Okay? But we get led in a particular way, oblivious to alternative ways of looking at things, and we're not there. And again, we're not there knowing that we're not there. Now, in the United States, there's a famous magician, David Copperfield. This is David Copperfield. There are 6 cards. Everybody should pick one of these 6 cards. And he wants you to think about it, because he's going to know which card you selected. Okay, everybody choose a card. Now, this is very important for this to work. We have to look right in his eyes and think about the card you selected. Okay? He doesn't know you, but he knows the card you've chosen. Look, your card is gone. For how many of you is the card you selected gone? It has to be all of you, because every card is different. All right? We don't see what's right in front of us. We don't see what's to the right, what's to the left of us, because we're not there. And again, we're oblivious to how often we tend to be wrong. An easy one. For those of you who couldn't add to 4,100, how much is 1 plus 1? Did I scare you? I'm a stranger here to your country. Treat me with more respect. I ask a question, answer. How much is 1 plus 1? No. All right. 1 plus 1 is 2 if you're using a base 10 number system. If you're using a base 2 number system, 1 plus 1 is written as 10. If you take 1 wad of chewing gum and you add it to 1 wad of chewing gum, 1 plus 1 is 1. You take 1 pile of snow, you add it to 1 pile of snow, 1 plus 1 is 1. Now the point is, once we think we know something, we don't pay any attention to it. But when we first learned it, we learned it in a single-minded way, when we could have learned it in a much broader way. And the problem is that we tend to think we know. So a shorthand, a way of understanding this mindlessness, is that we're frequently in error, but rarely in doubt. Anytime you see somebody who is certain, laugh a little to yourself that they're being mindless. Because since everything is always changing, and everything looks different from different perspectives, that certainty is misguided. Do you have snow here? Yes? Okay, and so in the States, for those of us who are, let's say, over 45, maybe even 50, we were taught that when the car starts to skid on snow, what you should do is gently press the brakes, and then you'll get control of the car again. Well, that made sense way back when. Now there are anti-lock brakes. If the car starts to skid and you have anti-lock brakes, you should firmly hit the brake. And the point is that mindlessness is not stupidity. You do what makes sense at time 1, you keep doing it, thinking it's fine, circumstances are changing. So in this instance here, you were taught, for safety's sake, to gently hit the brake. You think you know how to drive on snow, so you don't inquire again. And that very action that you learned to be safe is now going to get you into trouble. Okay? So mindlessness isn't stupidity. I made this purchase in a store, and I gave the salesperson my credit card. She saw that it was unsigned, and she asked me to sign it. I signed it. She then put it through the credit card machine, gave me the credit card slip, and asked me to sign it. I signed it. She then compared the two signatures. I just signed both of them in front of her. They had to match well enough. But she was oblivious to this. She wasn't there. When you're not there to know you're not there. 40 years of research that I and my students have done makes crystal clear to me that virtually all of us are not there most of the time. Now, no matter what you're doing it mindfully or mindlessly. Listening to a talk, giving a talk, eating noodles, playing tennis, no matter what, you're doing it either mindfully or mindlessly. And the consequences of being in one state of mind or another, the other, are enormous. When I'm talking about mindlessness, it's an inactive state of mind where we're responding like robots. The past overdetermines the present. We're trapped in a single perspective. We're oblivious to it. We're insensitive to context and perspective. We tend to be rule and routine governed. We do it because we have a rule that says do it. Even though the rule was made at time 1, this is time 2, the rule may no longer make any sense. But we don't question our rules and routines, we just mindlessly go forward. Mindfulness is so simple, it almost defies belief. It's the very simple process of noticing new things. As you notice new things, that puts you in the present. When you're in the present, that makes you sensitive to context and perspective. You can have rules and routines, but they don't overly determine what you're doing. They just gently guide what you're doing. So if they no longer make sense, you don't do it. All right? Now, the important thing to take away from this now is that the experience of being mindful, of noticing, just noticing new things. It doesn't matter if what you notice is smart, is serious. As long as you're noticing new things, the neurons are firing. And the experience of this noticing is the experience of engagement. It's the way we feel when we're feeling most alive. Right? So what happens is we notice novelty and the things we think we know. That reveals to us that we didn't know it as well as we thought we did, which leads our attention naturally to go to it. And that whole process is exciting. Now, it turns out that I believe that we should be mindful virtually all of the time. And people think, oh my goodness, that sounds exhausting. And that's because they don't understand what being mindful is. When you're having fun, when you're laughing at a joke is only funny when you realize you thought it meant this, and you see, oh, it meant that. All right? So could you enjoy yourself all day long? Probably. And you can be mindful all day long. For over 40 years, what we've done is study after study where we teach people to be mindful, and then we take our measures. Many measures, because 40 years is a lot of research. And what we find is we get measurable benefits to health, to competence, to well-being. In fact, in the earliest of these studies, we took old people, we gave them mindful choices, and we found that they lived longer. Right? So the argument is that this mindfulness is literally and figuratively enlivening. Here are some of the results from some of the studies. And I can talk to you about them later if anybody wants to attend to any one in particular. All right, now, excuse me. Because I'm an academic, and this is written, I say most of our problems. But just among us and the other 25 million people that I've said this to, all of our problems. I believe that virtually all of our problems, personal, professional, global. All of our problems are the direct or indirect consequence of mindlessness. So you can see how important it is as an individual, as a member of a particular culture, as a member of the world at large, to go from the mindless state that most of us experience to being mindful. Right now, there's an overwhelming tendency to use yesterday's solutions to solve today's problems. That wouldn't be the case if we all became more mindful. So the bottom line is, no matter what you're doing, at work, at home, at play, if you're doing it mindfully, it's going to work to your advantage. When you do things mindfully, what happens is you're aware of opportunities to which you'd otherwise be blind. You can avert the dangers not yet arisen. You're having fun while you're doing this. Okay, so mindlessness is bad for our health and our well-being. Being mindful, as you should agree at this point now, couldn't be easier. It's just noticing. When you recognize that you don't know, you naturally tune in. So I've shown you that you can't add. Very smart people, but you couldn't add. That a simple thing like how much is 1 and 1 you don't know. The takeaway message from that is that most of the things you think you know, you probably don't know. If you believe you don't know, then you pay attention. If you pay attention, you see things that you otherwise wouldn't see. And that process of seeing it feels good, and it turns out is good for you. Interestingly, our mindfulness is even visible, right? I did some research down in Mexico, Nuevo Vallarta, with dolphins. Turns out what we did was we took instructors of dolphins, trainers of dolphins, and we were going to have them be mindful or mindless. When they were mindless, we told them, we want you just to be thinking about all of the facts, all of the things you know about dolphins. So the trainer individually is in the water, thinking about the facts they've memorized about dolphins. Okay? Then the dolphin is released, and we want to see how fast the dolphin swims to the trainer and how long the dolphin stays with the trainer. When the trainer is mindful, he's also individually in the water and told, now we want you to be thinking about how this dolphin is different from all the other dolphins, and the subtle way the dolphin is different today from the way the same dolphin was yesterday. All of us are a little different, right? You should be a little different now from when you came in 10 minutes ago. So always in these studies, the mindless group is same old, thinking about what they already know, thinking about the past. The mindful group is thinking about something new. Right? The dolphin is released. What we find is they swim faster and stay longer when the trainer is mindful. We find the same thing with people. We have studies with children. We have studies with salesmen, I think, yeah. So we have magazine salesmen, and they learn this speech. They're going to go sell their magazines. The mindless group is told, learn it. When you know what you're going to say, go out and sell the magazine. The mindful group is told, make it new in very subtle ways that only you would know. So he changes it each time he gives the speech, ever so slightly. And what happens after they try to sell the magazine, somebody follows up and asks the customer what they thought of the salesperson. And it turns out that when the salesperson just made it different in very subtle ways, they were seen as charismatic. They also sold many more magazines. I think the essence of charisma, we want to be with people who are charismatic. That's because they're present. And it's so simple to be there. All right, so I think that this mindfulness is the essence of charisma, and as such, also the essence of effective leadership. And I'm going to show you this in some research we did with symphony orchestras. All right. The argument now is, first, when we're mindful, we're healthier, the neurons are firing, everything feels good. Next, that people look at us, they find us more appealing, more exciting. And now we're going to say that the products we make are even better when we're mindful. So I started painting when I was about 50, without knowing what I'm doing, but I had so much fun with this. Let me show you some of these paintings. This is sort of a dog in sort of a chair. I put my whole heart into it. I loved it. And the question I'm asking is my consciousness somehow on the canvas. I have so many of these I could take the rest of the time showing you, but I'll resist. These are very large paintings. They're also deeply psychological. Here, he has two friends that he could be playing with. Why is he playing solitaire? Okay. Let's get back to the research. In the United States, we have a bus company called Greyhound. So this is the Greyhound bus, a bus driven by a Jack Russell full of greyhounds. Just one more. You know the wrinkled dog, the Shar-Pei? The Chinese tend to like the wrinkled dog. This is before and after surgery. All right. The point is simply that I'm having a good time while I'm doing it. And is there something of my consciousness that I'm putting or leaving on that canvas? So we have lots of studies. The simplest ones, we'd have you draw, copy it again. Versus draw, copy it again, but this time, make it new in very subtle ways that only you would know. We mix them all together, and we ask people which do they prefer. They always prefer the mindfully created pieces. And we have this with essays. We have this with all sorts of products. All right. The most interesting of these studies, I think, is a study that we did with symphony orchestras. Now, in the States, at least, and I think this is true around the world, that members of orchestras hold, for them, a high status place. Their work is respected by most people, so they're loath to give it up. But many of them are bored to death because they're playing the same pieces of music over and over and over. And okay, so now we take some of these musicians and we say, okay, what we want you to do is remember a time you played, and we give them a particular piece of music, where you were pleased with your performance. And we want you to play it in that same way as well as you can. That's the mindless group. The mindful group is told, what we want you to do is make it new in very subtle ways that only you would know. Now, they're playing classical music, so it has to be subtle. Otherwise, it would be hard on the ears. All right? What we do is we tape the performances, and we're going to play those for people who have no idea about the study and just see which ones they preferred. We're going to ask the musicians which pieces they preferred playing. And what we found was very straightforward. People heard the difference. They overwhelmingly prefer the mindfully played piece. And the musicians prefer playing it that way. Now, there's something here that didn't occur to me until I wrote this up for publication that speaks to leadership, which was, here we have a situation where everybody is doing their own thing, and you end up with superior coordinated experience. Everybody is being mindful, making it slightly new, but they're taking their cues from the same ongoing situation, and the music turns out to be better, which leads me to believe that the main job of the leader is to provoke mindfulness in those being led. One of the things that keeps us from being mindful is the tyranny of evaluation. We tend to think that events are good or bad, people are good or bad. Good or bad is in our heads. It's not in events. Events are just events. People are just people. It's the way we see them that leads us to respond. Right now, for almost all of us, if we think it's good, we have to do what we can to get it. If we think it's bad, we have to do all that we can to stay away from it. Once we recognize that it is neither good nor bad, we can be basically at peace and still. So let me give you an example. There are so many here. This company is going to produce a glue. Okay? So they put all their resources into this glue production. Turns out that the glue fails to adhere. Oh my goodness. Terrible, terrible failure. Imagine what the CEO of that company felt like. All of his money, all of his time, all of his bragging, all of his dreams to produce a glue, and the glue fails to adhere. Terrible failure. However, what they thought to do was to create a Post-it note. Do you have Post-it notes in Korea? A Post-it note, the success of which depends on its failure to adhere. So was it a success or a failure? It was a failed glue. It was a successful Post-it note. Now, we've done lots of studies, I won't have time to talk to you about it here, but on innovation, where the bottom line to be innovative is to take this thing, and you don't call it, for in this case here, a failed glue. It's something itself. It's not just a failure of that. And when you say, what would you do with a substance that adheres for a short amount of time, lots of things will occur to you. So you go down to the level of property. Okay. This person created this defogger to save the crops in Florida. Sprays all of the crops in Florida. What happens is it produces this icy, snowy substance that kills the crops. Oh my gosh. A failure. So much stress, embarrassment. Terrible. What is he going to do having put all his time and effort into this machine that produces this icy, snowy substance and kills the crops? Well, what happened? Somebody came along, took the exact same machine to spray the slopes in New England for skiers who wanted to ski when Mother Nature didn't provide snow. Was it a success or a failure? As a defogger, it was a failure. As a ski-making, snow-making machine, it was a success. I have experience. I make this marble cheesecake. It's delicious, but in all these years, never has it turned out to be marbled. And then I said, why am I doing this? I changed it. Everything is the same, except I call it a speckled cheesecake. It's the world's best speckled cheesecake. Do you understand that much of the success and failure that we experience, we can control in ways that are quite different from where we set out? If you only have one understanding of success, it's going to be harder to be successful. But if you say, what can I do with this? What are the advantages? You fail the test. That seems awful. In places in the East, as in Korea, that becomes a shame, and people suffer. But if you ask yourself instead, what might be the advantage of failing that test? And you will always come up with advantages. A mistake in one context is a success in another if you choose to look for it. The same is true for people. We have a sense of people being good, bad. People are nothing. They're not good, they're not bad. It all depends on how we view them. So you may see me as gullible. I see myself as trusting. I may see Chanmo as impulsive. Hopefully Chanmo sees himself as spontaneous. I may see you as rigid. You may see yourself as dependable, someone you can count on. Do you understand? No matter what trait description you come up with, there's an equally powerful but oppositely balanced way of looking at it. Are you lazy or are you insufficiently motivated? Are you distracted or are you otherwise attracted? And we have to be careful, because if they have the power, whoever they are, we have the problem. So you have lots of kids across the board around the globe who are said to have an attention deficit disorder because they don't pay attention to the teacher. If the teacher's not interesting, whose problem is it? So are they attracted, distracted, or otherwise attracted? All right, so when you're disagreeing with somebody, you're having a miserable time with somebody, ask yourself, what sense did that person's behavior make from their perspective? They will stop being annoying to you. Right? I may want to change you if I think that you're rigid. Oh, you drive me crazy. I can't bear being with you. You're so rigid. Well, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know, today I'm going to be rigid, conforming, clumsy, irritating. So what are they intending? So you ask them, ask yourself, what was this person who was rigid intending to be? Probably someone stable, someone you could count on. So what happens is that we don't try to change their behavior. Now we appreciate it. Before, your rigidity was driving me crazy. Now I see that it's actually you're being stable. I value it. We did a study many years ago where I gave people about 300 of these kinds of words, the negative versions, and I said, check those things that you can't stand about yourself, that you keep trying to change, but you're not able to change. So for me, I'd check impulsive. Okay? Then you turn the sheet of paper over. In a mixed up order are the positive versions of each of these words. Now we ask people, check those things you really value about yourself. Spontaneity. Well, of course I can't stop being impulsive as long as I value being spontaneous. But if you and I saw my behavior and your behavior from the same perspective, the perspective from which it was intended, neither of us would want to change the behavior. So you can see in this way how being more mindful leads you to be less judgmental, less evaluative of yourself and other people. So what do we have so far? Our mindlessness is visible. You should be authentic because people know when you're not being authentic. When you're mindful, you're there. When you're not there, people know you're not there. So you're not fooling anyone anyway. Our mindfulness is charismatic. Evaluations are in our heads, not in the things we're evaluating. Most important is that uncertainty is the rule, not the exception. Everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. You're never going to be able to get rid of uncertainty. People confuse the stability of their mindsets with the stability of the underlying phenomenon. It's changing. You want to hold it still in your head, hold it still, but it's changing. And what we want to do is exploit the power in this uncertainty, not run away from the uncertainty. Mindlessness is pervasive. When we're mindless, we fail to notice change. Since things are all the while changing, it leaves us vulnerable, blind to possibility and opportunity. All sorts of possibilities open up when we allow ourselves to be mindful. Now, the consequences of this mindfulness are astounding. I've already shared some with you that should impress you enough already. That when you're mindful, the neurons are firing, people find you more attractive, the things you do are better, you feel engaged, life is glorious, and you're going to live longer. What else is there? Well, there's more. I want, in the study of the power of possibility, to raise lots of questions. Why are we so sure we can't improve vision beyond 2020? Just think ourselves thin. Reverse virtually all brain damage. What we need to do is free ourselves from constricting mindsets and the limits they place on our health. What I'm saying is everything we think we know may be wrong. And if we start off with the assumption that it might be wrong and pursue ways of bringing about the outcomes that we want, we'll end up surprised at how successful we're likely to be. Much of this came to me. I was at a horse event. This man asked me, would I watch his horse because he wanted to go get his horse a hot dog. Now, as you were told, I'm Harvard, Yale all the way through. I memorized things that normal students didn't even think to memorize. I knew horses are herbivorous. They do not eat meat. Can I have some water? He comes back with the hot dog, and what happened? The horse ate it. And it was at that moment that I realized everything I knew might be wrong. Everything. Now, you could run from that, or that can open up all sorts of possibilities. And I started to think about science. Now, when you run a study in science, as our illustrious chair will tell you, that no matter what the science is, the science can only yield probabilities. Our research says that if you do exactly the same things, which you can never do, but let's say, okay, if you were able to do exactly the same thing, you probably would get the same result. That's translated as an absolute. Do you understand? Horses don't eat meat. No, some horses, under some circumstances, don't eat meat. It probably depends on how much meat is mixed with how much grain, how hungry the horses are, how large the horses are, and so on and so forth. That is translated into horses don't eat meat. I mean, to make it, let's say you're out in the desert and you're on your horse and all you have are hot dogs and, and the horse is starving, and if you're not going to be able to walk back to safety, I don't know about you, but it wouldn't have prior to this occurred to me to give the horse a hot dog, because horses don't eat meat. All right, the point is, when we know for sure, we don't think of alternative creative ways of using the information. All right, so the point is that the facts that we've taken in as true are only true some of the time. Once we realize it isn't so, then we can consider what you might have otherwise seen to be outrageous ideas. That's what I want to point to. First, let me tell you, a famous philosopher, Schopenhauer, said, all research passes through 3 phases. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, it's accepted as self-evident. Einstein said if an idea isn't at first seen to be absurd, there's no hope for it. And I want to tell you about an idea that's so simple, yet the consequences of it are enormous. I'm going to tell you 2 things before that. The first, for all chronic illnesses, we act as if the symptoms are always the same. Nothing is always the same. Nothing. By treating it as if it's the same, we give up control over our most dread diseases. Let's take chronic pain. People who are in chronic pain think they're always in chronic pain. No one is always anything. If instead you paid attention to when you're in pain, when it was greater, when it was lesser, then you could ask yourself, well, why now is it less? And then try out new things to fix it. Let me give you an easy example. Let's say you have asthma. Does anyone here have asthma? People in Korea don't have asthma? All right, that's good. Don't go to the States, because lots of people in the States have asthma. All right, so you're told you have asthma. What people then do is when they need the inhaler, they breathe in the inhaler. That's all. They don't pay attention to anything else. Now, if you were in one of our studies, what we'd say to you is, well, let's pay attention to when you need the inhaler. Look at that. When you're with Ellen Langer, you need the inhaler. When you're with Chanmo Park, you don't need the inhaler. What an insight. We've just controlled your asthma, right? Don't be with me. Or make your time with me the same way it is with Chanmo. Do you understand? By recognizing that things change and asking yourself, well, why, when, how, we can get control over many of our disorders. The first thing is, let's take pain. First, you think you're in terrible pain all the time. When you start paying attention to when it's better and worse, the first thing is you realize, gee, you're not in terrible pain all the time. So you immediately feel better. All right? Now, there are questions that come up from these studies, and we've done these studies with MS, ALS, severe traumatic brain disorder, asthma, depression. Those are the ones I remember, at least at this moment. But a question is, when you don't have the symptoms, do you still have the disease? What causes symptoms to go into spontaneous remission? How do placebos work? You know placebos? This is our most powerful drug that the medical world can offer. Now, if you're taking a placebo, it's a sugar pill. It's nothing. To be a placebo means it's inert. So when you get better, how are you getting better? You're making yourselves better. So my life's work, in part, is to figure out how to do this directly without having to play the game with ourselves. For someone to give me this thing that's nothing, for me to take it so I can heal myself. Spontaneous remissions many, many, many years ago, when my mother's cancer, breast cancer, had gotten to her pancreas, and that's the end game. And then all of a sudden it was gone. And the medical world couldn't explain it. And I think what I'm going to share with you in a moment is a psychological explanation that may explain both placebos and spontaneous remissions. This is a new view of health. Very simple. We have around the globe for centuries what's called the mind-body problem. The mind-body problem is, how do you get from something material, a thought, something fuzzy, you can't hold it, where is it, to something real? But we all know that our thoughts affect our bodies, right? You're walking down the street and a leaf blows in your face and you get startled until you realize it was just a leaf. Your blood pressure increases, your pulse increases, and so on, right? Just from the thought. Okay. Now, what occurred to me is that mind, body, these are just words. And if we take the mind and the body and we just put them back together, the problem goes away. Because wherever you're putting one, you're necessarily putting the other. So we did a host of studies where we treat the mind and body just as one. We put the mind in strange places and take our measurements from the body. The first of these studies was the counterclockwise study. The counterclockwise study, we took old men, and they were old. This was done in 1979. They were 80 years old. That's when 80 was 80, not the new 60. They were old. We were going to have them live in a retreat that we had retrofitted to 20 years earlier. They were going to live there as if it was, in fact, 1959. They would be talking about events of the past in the present tense, surrounded by icons, magazines, books from that time. All right? They would be watching television shows and movies from 1959, discussing them as if they just happened now. A comparison group spent this week in the same retreat, discussing the same topics, but they were reminiscing. They knew now was now and then was then. Okay? Now, what happened, so here's some, we ran this in the States, so these are some of the icons from 1959. Now, one of the things you need to realize is that for this reminiscing group, they're spending a week in a novel environment where we're pushing them, right? when they came to see if they could be in the study, they came with their adult daughters usually, who were over helping them. Now all of a sudden they're at this retreat, no one is there to help them. In fact, I did this thing unplanned. When we first drove up in the bus, I realized I didn't have my graduate students or my postdocs with me. I was just there with these 8 old men and 8 large suitcases. So I made an announcement to them, unplanned, but it worked out well, where I said, you're in charge of your own suitcases. I don't care if you move them an inch at a time, or if you unpack them here at the corner, a shirt at a time. Now you have to appreciate anybody here who's cared for an elderly parent or grandparent, how different that must have felt to them from the way they had been coddled. You're on your own. Right? As a result of that, they improved. Both groups living in this mindfulness-inducing environment had an increase in hearing. When was the last time you heard hearing improve? Their memory, their strength improved. Over and above this, for the experimental group, their vision improved. We took photographs of everybody before the study started, excuse me, and we took photographs at the end and showed them to people who, again, knew nothing about the study. And we asked them to rate how old the people looked. And everyone in that experimental group was seen to look younger than they were. Not 20 years younger, but still younger. Now, this was replicated in South Korea. I don't know if any of you got to see this, but it's also been replicated in England and in the Netherlands. Now, more recently, we have this chambermaid study testing the same idea. Mind, body, they're one. Wherever we put the mind, we're putting the body. Chambermaids, as you know, exercise all day long. That's what their work is, exercise. So the first thing we ask them is, how much exercise do you get? They say they don't get any exercise. And that's because to them, exercise is what you do after work. And after work, they're just too tired. So now we take half of these women, and we teach them that their work is exercise. Making a bed, we show them, is like working on this particular piece of equipment at the gym, and so on. So now we have 2 groups. We have one group of chambermaids who still has no idea or doesn't cognize their work as exercise. One group that sees their work as exercise. We take lots of measures. We come back, I think it was 6 weeks later, I'm not absolutely sure, it could have been 4 weeks. And we take a whole bunch of other measures and we say, is she working harder than she was before? No differences. Are you eating any more or less? No matter what we ask, there are no differences, except on the important measures. I put that up just to see if you were paying attention. All right. Now, just to make sure, before I tell you the results, that we're all on the same page, what I'm saying is this woman in pink, if she thinks of herself as spending the whole day at the gym, even if she's not doing any exercise while she's at the gym, but doesn't realize she's not exercising while she's at the gym, she will lose weight. Okay. If our minds are in a place, our bodies are there as well. What did we find? Significant change in weight, a decrease in body mass index, a decrease in waist to hip ratio, and a decrease in blood pressure, all because of a simple change in mindset. In another study, assessing vision. Now vision, this is, I'm bizarre, I know that. When you go to your doctor and he asks you or she asks you to read the eye chart, you just read it. For me, I look at it and I say, wait a second, somebody is expecting that soon I'm not going to be able to see. You see letters, I see letters getting smaller. Somebody is telling me I'm not going to be able to see. I also question, what an insane way to assess my vision. I don't know about you, but when I'm hungry, I see the restaurant sign a lot sooner than when I'm not hungry. I see things in color, things that are moving, differently from things that are still. I see things that are meaningful to me sooner than things that are just letters out of any context. More important than that, I see in the morning differently from the way I see in the late afternoon. What the medical world does is you come in, we give you a test, I give you a number. If that number says you should get glasses, you get glasses, and that's the end of the game. When do you need those glasses? Not all day long, but when do you wear them? All day long. And you train your body to use them, rather than the control you have by noticing when you need it, when you don't, when it's better, when it's worse, and then asking yourself why. So we do a few simple studies. We give people these eye chests here where letters are getting progressively smaller, suggesting soon you won't be able to see. Then for other subjects, what we do is reverse it. So now the letters are getting progressively larger, telling us soon we will be able to see. And what happens? People can see what they couldn't see before. Now, most of us believe around 2/3 of the way down the eye chart, I'm not going to be able to see. So what we did, we start the eye chart down 1/3 of the way. So now 2/3 of the way down are much smaller letters. People can see what they couldn't see before. We have studies where we have young men put on Air Force pilot uniforms because the belief is Air Force pilots have wonderful vision. So before they're in the Air Force pilot uniforms, we give them vision tests. Then all of a sudden they're Air Force pilots, and we have them in a flight simulator. And we have them looking out at the chart that's outside the window in the flight simulator. And because they're airline pilots, now they can see better. But they're the ones who are seeing. Do you understand? When I'm in the shower and I'm singing as if I'm Maria Callas, I can hold a note better, I think. There's no one with me to correct this, so I'm not sure, than if I'm just being Ellen Langer. If you put on the mindset of the best person you know, that's like taking a placebo, but then what you need to do is say, hey, wait a second, it was just you. It was just that person outside of the Air Force pilot uniform. So I guess he can see better than he thinks he can. And so on. Okay. So the most recent study we did, I did with Chanmo Park on diabetes. The same idea, a version of these counterclockwise studies. We have people who have type 2 diabetes show up for the study. They're going to play video games. Next to the computer is a clock. So we tell them, around every 15 minutes, we want you to change the game you're playing. And that's just so they'll pay attention to the clock. Because what we did was for 1/3 of the people, the clock is going twice as fast as real time. For 1/3 of the people, the clock is going half as fast as real time. For 1/3 of the people, it's real time. The question we're asking is, does blood sugar level follow real or perceived time? And the answer was perceived time. Now, I don't know how much of this you can decode, especially in a foreign language, and understand the meaning of all of this, but it suggests that a psychological cure for diabetes is right around the corner without any medical intervention. And I ask each of you that are wearing glasses to take off the glasses. Not right this moment, because I want to be seen. I put on a nice outfit for you. But during the day, take them off. See, when do you see better? When do you see worse? And why? You know, we have disorders like dyslexia, for instance. Everything is a disorder, a disease these days. So for dyslexia, is anybody here dyslexic? Do you know what dyslexia is? Where you might confuse a D and a B. You mix up letters and numbers. Most dyslexics, if I gave them a page to read that, let's say, had 250 words on it, at most they'd get 5 words wrong. That means they're getting, who is our mathematician here, over 95% correct. Why define yourself by what you're getting wrong rather than what you're getting right? Now when you see you only get a couple of things wrong, then you can ask yourself why. So you say, why does it hurt now when it didn't hurt before? Why can I see now or not see now when I couldn't see before? And so on and so forth. And then you say, gee, under these circumstances, these few circumstances, because the letters are the same in all these different words, but when it's an O followed by a B, then I don't see it correctly. And then your disorder becomes very small, rather than the way most of us see the things we can't do. All right, so let me say that I believe we're going to prosper by being mindful all of the time. That when you recognize that when you're your happiest, when you're excited, engaged, then you're being mindful. It's easy to see that you can do this all the time. This is easier to do if we remove the negative mindsets we have regarding our health and the presumed limits that we impose on ourselves. And doing so opens up all sorts of possibilities. And even if we're unsuccessful in meeting our health goal, this process of seeing when we can, when we can't, is good for us. It's good for our health and well-being. So the magic, to go back to David Copperfield, lies in our being aware of the ways we mindlessly react to social and cultural cues. We need to challenge the idea that the limits we assume are real have to exist at all. With only subtle shifts in our thinking, we can begin to change the ingrained behaviors that sap health, optimism, and vitality from our lives. Improved vision, younger appearance, weight loss, increased longevity. These are just a few of the many experimental results that are a consequence of these subtle changes. We have so much more control over our health and well-being than most people imagine. I think that join me on this journey to see just how far we can push all of this. So let me thank you and say that, again, in keeping with this conference, how to be happy, how to be healthy, how to be competent, how to feel good, wake up in the morning smiling. It's not hard. You just need to be more mindful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan, for your insightful talk. You raised several thought-provoking ideas. I think most of the audience really enjoyed the talk. Okay.
Now, most means not all. So raise your hand who didn't enjoy it. Okay.
Before I get started a panel discussion, we invited another panelist, Chanmo Park. Yeah. He is a CEO in the LMI Korea, and he is now studying in the Harvard University in the Department of Psychology as a PhD candidate. He's studying the health psychology, as you mentioned, the diabetes, the counterclockwise study. Okay, so what's your impression about our talk?
Yes, first of all,
I don't know if that's on.
누르시고,
okay,
예.
okay. First of all, actually I was supposed to provide some comments on Professor Langer's research. The point is, now I'm thinking it's very mindless, because he's my advisor. I have to give you nice comments and flattering comments. So
You don't have to.
Yeah, but instead of talking about her research, I just going directly to the questions. And I think it's a good start. My first question is actually, there is some confusions originating from the two different approaches of mindfulness. One is John Kabat-Zinn, it's more like a meditation way of mindfulness, and the other one is Alan's mindfulness. It's based without meditation. So, do you think, can you explain about the similarities and differences between two approaches?
Sure. So mindfulness, as I've been talking about it and studying it for close to 40 years, comes from a Western scientific perspective. It was interesting that I started the work studying mindlessness, and somebody had said, I don't remember who it was, but that you are what you study. So I turned it around and started to study mindfulness. Mm-hmm. That gave rise to people making clear to me all about, was the rest of the about Buddhism and the like. So I know a fair amount about Eastern forms of mindfulness. And what people need to understand is that meditation, and I did some of the earliest research on meditation, meditation is simply a tool. It's a good tool, but it's no more than a tool to lead to post-meditative mindfulness. So if you imagine you were coming to Seoul, and you could come by car, by train, by airplane. Once you're here, all right? You can get here by meditating. You can get here in the way I'm suggesting, which is accept that you don't know, notice new things, and that immediately leads us to be more mindful. So when you're mindful, no matter how you get there, you should be less judgmental, happier, healthier. But the means are very different, because whether it's John Kabat-Zinn or any of the other people whose work is based in meditation, they see that as a practice. Mm-hmm. And for them, it's a difficult practice. Now, I've said to you already that mindfulness, as we study it, is easy. Mm-hmm. It's energy begetting, not consuming. I'm this close to telling you a joke to show you that humor relies on mindfulness, but I don't know how it'll do in translation. Let me try. So did you hear that this clairvoyant midget escaped from prison? There's a small, medium at large. Okay. And I'll tell you, they don't laugh in the States either. So, all right, but the point of it is that a joke is only funny when you think you understand, and all of a sudden you see it could mean something else. And that experience is exciting, it's uplifting, it's energy begetting, not consuming. So there are differences between what we do and what they do, much of the time with the same goal in mind, to lead to a state of being where you recognize that your thoughts are just thoughts. They're not real in some way. That the control you have over your lives, our lives, is much greater than most of us assume. But for us, there are things you can do with mindfulness as we study it that don't naturally follow from meditation. For example, Chanmo, as you heard, is in charge of the Langer Mindfulness Institute, and much of the work is going to be around education. And for education, we can write a different kind of textbook that leads people to be mindful. Right now, the textbooks written are all in absolute language. Horses don't eat meat. You learn it, you think it, but it's just not true. All right? So they would give rise to a different kind of thinking. We can create external environments that give rise to an appreciation of change rather than stability. Period.
So let me add my question on your comment. It was very impressive to me, and when I read your book, that your mindfulness is quite different from the meditation or yoga thing. Which means that your mindfulness is quite a scientific concept.
Yes, but it should be understood that they're not mutually exclusive. One can do both.
Yeah, right. But so instead of the audience, I'd like to ask you how we can measure the degree of mindfulness or mindlessness. Because they'd like to know how much they are mindful.
Well, okay, take my word for it. At least before this lecture today, Most of you are mindless almost all the time. Okay. Now, we have a mindfulness scale, but it's imperfect at best.
Okay. Is it accessible in the internet?
No, no, it will be eventually.
Okay.
Chanmo can speak to that better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that if you find yourself suffering regrets, procrastinating, being angry, blaming, those sorts of things, say you're mindless. Because when you're mindful, you realize you choose your emotional state. All right, so let me tell you something that's kind of fun. I'm going to go over here and just get my water so I can tell you the whole story. I was asked to give a lecture or a sermon in a big temple, a church in Cambridge. And I'm not particularly religious, and I didn't know, well, what should I talk about? And then what I realized, all right, forgiveness sounds like something that feels religious enough. So I start thinking about forgiveness, and then I realized I came up with something that turned out to almost be sacrilegious. I gave it anyway. If you ask 10 people, is forgiveness good or bad, what will they tell you? It's good. If you ask 10 people, is blame good or bad, what will they tell you? It's bad. But unless you blame, there's no reason to forgive. So our blamers are our forgivers. Now, do you blame people for good things or bad things? You blame people for bad things. But things in and of themselves are neither good nor bad. So what do we have? We have a situation where people who see the world negatively blame, setting themselves up to forgive. Hardly divine. All right. What is the point of this? I don't know. I needed a glass of water. It was over there, and I thought to get the water, I'd tell you a story. No, the point is that a way to recognize how mindless you are is how ill at ease you are. If you get angry a lot, what does anger mean? Anger means there's some outcome that you think you should have gotten, that you're suffering because you don't have it. All of those are mindless. When you think procrastination, now I never procrastinate, not because I'm better than you are. Procrastination, we can say all of us, right now we're procrastinating. There's a book I'm not writing while I'm talking to you. There's always something that you're not doing when you're doing something else. If you choose to be doing what you're doing, you'll never see yourself as procrastinating. Do you understand? Yeah. And so it is with all of the negative emotions that we experience. So if you experience no negative emotions and you find yourself basically steady and happy, then I would say you're probably more mindful than most people.
Chanmo, you might
Yeah, sure.
have several questions.
Actually, about the LMS, we have KLMS is published in 2002, so it has a great validity and reliability, so we have the scale.
Okay.
And then I think you talked about the Korean education system, and I think it's good time for us to apply your theory to Korean education. And I have many opportunities to have lecture or your mindfulness in South Korea. And I noticed that, surprisingly, a lot of students, Korean students, know how important your study is. And even their parents agreed, and they like, and they think it's really good way to approach towards education based on your mindfulness. The point is, okay, this is really nice approach. The thing is that I have to prepare upcoming exams, university entrance exams. So I don't know. They know that it's good, but they don't know how to approach from their perspective because they have to prepare upcoming exams and entrance exams.
So let me tell you a little study that we did that may seem far afield at first. We gave people these index cards that had jokes on them. and we wanted them to rate them. Right? So this would seem to be a fun activity. But for half of the people, we presented it as if it was work. For the other half of people, the exact same task, we made it as if it was a game. They're doing the same thing. But with the group that thought that it was work, their minds wandered, they didn't enjoy it. When we asked how much money we'd have to pay them to have them do more, they wanted much more money. Mm-hmm. The point is that no matter what you're doing, you can do it in a way that makes it fun or difficult. And that whether it's studying, you know, if you look at the people who do the best in their careers, chances are they're doing it mindfully. They don't tell you that it's fun, because then you don't think, aren't they big and strong and wonderful? But they're enjoying it. Anything can be made enjoyable. I have a little quote, I don't have it memorized, but it's Mark Twain, and he's talking about the Mississippi, the river. And he's just talking about water, just water, and it comes alive. Now, we did a study where we have people who are people who don't like art. They don't, another group that doesn't like music, another group that doesn't like football. We have a lot of people who don't like, right? We have one group of each of these do the activity. Another group notice one new thing about it. Another group, 3 new things about it. Another group, 6 new things about the activity. So if you don't like football and you notice the rear ends of the football players, whatever it is you notice, the more of these things you notice, it turns out the more you like the activity. Right? When we memorize, and I told you that, you know, I was the best, and it was pointless, but that's the way I studied. I could have been Korean. Right? I memorized, and I memorized. If you make it meaningful, you will learn it. And making it meaningful makes it fun. So you have to find a way to make it a game. And anything can be made into a game. On the other side of this, the other side of the stress, a friend of mine lived in Museum Towers in New York. So it's right next to the Museum of Modern Art, people who are very, very wealthy. And you go into the building, and there's an elevator operator. Well, we all know we don't need elevator operators. When you press the button and you get up to the floor. Because people who are wealthy need to have people waiting on them all the time, there was an elevator operator. So I gave him the floor that I wanted to go to. It was the 33rd floor. He looked at the numbers and then turned around and looked back. The game he had created for himself was, could he get me to the 33rd floor without looking? Right? And he had to look a couple of times because he couldn't get me and keep his job to the 38th floor and then go back. All right? He made it a game. It wasn't boring. Stress. You know, part of the problem is not that you're memorizing and that you're so afraid you're not going, you know, that the way you're preparing for these exams, but it's the stress that comes in, oh my gosh, what if it doesn't work? What if I fail? Stress is not a function of outcomes. Stress is a function of the view you take of events. If you open it up and see how might this thing actually be a blessing, it becomes less stressful. Stress requires 2 things. One is the belief, excuse me, that this thing is going to happen, and 2, that when it happens, it's going to be awful. Well, you can attack both of those. Come up with 3 reasons why it might not happen. So you went from it's definitely going to happen to maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. It's immediately less stressful. Now assume it does happen. What are 3 reasons that it might actually be a good thing? Now, you know, so let's say you're in a relationship. Is divorce a problem in Korea or just in South? Okay. That you're in a relationship and you're afraid the relationship is going to end. So you're stressed. Well, let me tell you, life is short. You don't want to spend your time in a relationship that doesn't feel good. You don't want to be at a job where you're not being nurtured and respected, where you're worried that you're going to lose your job at any moment. So if you lost the job, it would probably turn out to be an advantage. But once you see that it may happen, it might not happen, if it happens, it'll have good things, it'll have bad things, you can put aside most of the stress. When you begin the activity, whether you're bored to death, think of the elevator operator. If you're studying for an exam, make it fun. It can always be made into fun. And then what happens is by making it meaningful, you don't have to work hard to remember it. You'll just remember it.
Okay. Your mindfulness, you mentioned that the mindfulness is, can be applied to the business. For example, the mindfulness leads people to be more successful in business.
Yes.
So I'd like to know where the mindfulness in the company or government start?
I think that it's relevant no matter at what level. So for the individual workers, that we have, when we have a notion of good and bad, some people are worthwhile, others aren't. You know, let me tell us in a different way. I was lecturing in South Africa, and I was staying at this fancy resort. And I spent one day down by the swimming pool, and there was this large area that was totally unused. And the only person who knew this was the lowly cabana boy. Now, there was a lot of money potentially to be made by reusing that space, but none of the people in charge were ever going to find out. And the point is, if we realize that everybody has something to offer, then we treat people differently, and we all prosper. All right, so that's number one. Number two, that when we're more mindful, we're able to be more innovative. When we're, you know, we have some things, like I've worked at some companies, large energy companies, where they have zero accident policies. All that means is you're going to maximize lying, right? Because accidents will happen. But we need to recognize that with an accident, with a mistake, with a failure, turned another way, you get a Post-it note or a snow-blowing machine. Remember what I was saying before. That things are only negative within a particular context. Switch the context, and it becomes positive. That when we encourage people to do it their own way, to make it interesting, and we actually value them. We don't pretend we value them. How do you value people? You look at their behavior from their perspective, right? So you don't feel bad for me that I'm gullible and decide, well, you're going to try to be nice to me. You're gullible, but, you know, poor thing. Appreciate that I'm not gullible, I'm trusting. And I would rather be trusting. Life is just nicer for me. Okay, so what happens is the more mindful we are, the more we value the people around us, the more they feel valued, the more being at work feels good, the more work you get done. When we get rid of notions of mistakes, then when something goes wrong, we try to find how to turn it inside out and take advantage of it.
Does it require the leadership commitment?
Well, it's interesting. It's the same thing as with students. You know, that if I were going to fix the education system, which I actually would like to do in Korea with Chanmo, I mean this quite seriously, is to start at the top, change the textbooks, teach the teachers. But in the meantime, the individual students don't have to wait. So when I say to you some fact, horses don't eat meat, as your parent, I could have taught you, when your teacher says horses don't eat meat, or anything else that's absolute, know that it's not quite right. That everything is potentially true some of the time.
Both.
So same thing in business, that it's best if we can get it from the top down, but the individual worker can still be mindful.
So both top-down and bottom-up
bottom-up,
approach are
yeah.
also required. Okay.
Yeah. And then what happens is that all of the health results, and I didn't talk to you about most of the early studies, where we make people mindful, they live longer, right? That if you have a business and you have people being healthier, you're paying out less money. You have less absenteeism and the like. You know, I do a lot of consulting to these very large insurance companies, and it's mind-boggling to me that it took so long around the globe for them to realize. Because by teaching them how to make their customers healthier, they're still collecting premiums, but not having to pay out.
So basically, you're mentioning we should approach Korean education system from both from top-down, government-wise, and institutional-wise, and from individual level, bottom-up approach. So you often mention about the like work-life integration, not the balance.
Yeah.
Do you think you can?
And let me explain that to you. So you must realize at this point that most things that I hear from most people strike me as not quite right. And a lot of business gurus are happy to say what we should do is seek work-life balance. Now that means that work is necessarily stressful, hard, and awful, so you need to mix it with some fun at home. I think that that's mindless. Work-life balance is certainly better than work-life imbalance. But I think that what we want to seek is work-life integration. You want to be the same person at work that you are at home. People believe work has to be stressful. No, it doesn't, it shouldn't. It's not good for you, it's not good for the company, and it's all based on our mindless notions of evaluation. I think that if you seek work-life integration, being the same person, you could take the best of your home life, bring it to work, the best of your work life, and bring it home, and be the same person wherever you are. It's interesting, social psychology, when I first entered the field way back in the dark ages, had the idea that behavior is context dependent. So you had at that time people believing that who they are, what they do, is a function of their personalities. They can control, they're the masters of their fate. Then psychologists, social psychologists would say, well, no, you're really a victim of the context. You know, so that if you're in a scary context, you get intimidated. If you're in a supportive context, you feel friendly. I could take all of you, for instance, and have you think about the worst parts of parties, and then have you fill out an introversion-extroversion scale, and you'll all be more introverted on the scale than if I didn't create that context to start. Anyway, where I'm going with this is that it took many years for me to get to the point of realizing who creates the context. We create the context for ourselves. And if you know that thinking you're an Air Force pilot, you have good vision, be an Air Force pilot in your head. If you know, so my mother, when she was in the hospital, you know, you have hospital behavior, and I know as polite Koreans, you're even more likely to do these things than people in the States, which is wonderful some of the time. Following the rules, being polite. But this was my mother. And the rule was visiting hours were over at 7 o'clock. There was no way I was leaving at 7 o'clock unless she wanted me to leave at 7 o'clock. All right, so what I'm saying, there are two contexts. One was the context of hospital rules. If I was behaving within that context, I leave at 7 o'clock. I superimposed on that the context of relationship, what matters to my mother, pleasing my mother. So if she wanted me there till 8:30, come hell or high water, I told them. And they were going to just leave me alone rather than have to deal with me. All right, so the point is, if we pay attention to ourselves and we see under what circumstances we thrive and what circumstances we shrivel up, then create for ourselves those thriving circumstances, no matter in what context we find ourselves.
Okay. I received several question sheets from the audience, and there are quite similar questions. Most of the audience want to know how to get the mindfulness or the way to become
the way mindful. To be, well, so I've just talked to you now for almost 2 hours trying to tell you how to become more mindful. Yeah. It's okay. You know, that it's hard to believe it's as simple as I'm telling you that it is. The way to become more mindful is first to recognize that you don't know, that uncertainty is the rule, not the exception. So if you don't know, then you naturally tune in. If Chanmo is going to ask me a question and I thought I knew, why pay attention to him? If I say, maybe it'll be a question I don't know that he's going to ask me, I actually listen. What are we trying to do?
No, seriously.
Oh, quite. Here, why don't you just give it to me? We don't need it.
This is in Korean language.
Oh, I can speak Korean. I see the question. The answer is yes. All right. So how do you become more mindful? You recognize that all of those negative emotions you're experiencing are mindless. Okay, so then you start to turn it around for yourself. You say, how might this be a good thing? All the people you don't like, you're holding still. Their behavior is varying. Nobody is anything all the time. The person you don't like isn't unlikable all the time. When they're unlikable, what are they being from their perspective? Rigid versus consistent, dependable, impulsive versus spontaneous, and so on. So when you're feeling angry, you're saying to yourself, I need this thing. For what? Evaluate. So if you remember, behavior makes sense from the actor's perspective, or else the actor wouldn't do it, whether it's you or somebody else. If you say to yourself, events are neither good nor bad, it's the way I understand them. So whenever you're feeling or you say, I don't have to feel that way. Let me turn it around, understand it differently. As a general rule, you want to be confident but uncertain. Recognize that you don't know. Keep in mind that what I've said to you, and I ask you, how much is 1 and 1? The thing we think we all know, and we're wrong. That we really don't know, and not knowing is good. Not knowing means we're going to pay more attention. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Actually, her question is about, how can you constantly pay attention to things?
Yes, okay, so it sounds difficult. How can you constantly pay attention? But paying attention is the essence of engagement. It's, okay, so all of you are going to come visit me in Cambridge. So how many of you have been to Harvard, Cambridge, Massachusetts? Okay, you're not invited. Everybody else is going to come with me. You're going to get off the airplane, and you're going to be looking. And you say, what's new? You're going to be noticing all sorts of things. Is it hard? No. It's exciting. You meet somebody new. You get that little feeling of attraction, and maybe this will be a boyfriend or a girlfriend for you. What you're doing is you're paying attention. All right? You go to a movie or watch a television show that you haven't already seen. You're looking for how this is new, right? You don't see it as same old, same old. So this active noticing of novelty is the essence of engagement. It's exciting. It's not difficult. What's difficult is the feeling, what if I don't understand it? What if somebody thinks that I am, less than I want to be seen as? What if I get it wrong? So the mistake we too often make is that when somebody says, you're whatever, And the tendency is to say, no, 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 I'm not like that. I tell you instead of that to say, yes, that's exactly what I am, but I understand it this way. So you say to me, I had this experience that I shouldn't share, but I will, where I was taken by a psychopath for an enormous amount of money. An enormous amount of money. And you can say that I'm gullible. So you accuse me of being gullible. Now, what most people, when they're accused, do say, no, no, I'm not gullible. It was only that person that, that I believed because it was... I don't do that. I say, no, I'm not gullible. I'm trusting. And I prefer to be trusting. Do you understand what I'm saying? When you're accused of doing X, don't say you don't do X. Say, yes, you do X, but you're misunderstanding how glorious X is. It's very different. Everything about our relationships with other people changes when you're more mindful. It's all just easier. You can ask me in English or Korean?
Excuse me. It doesn't work.
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. That is not my real question. Let me add you some more in Korean language because
okay, now that's the first time I've been asked a fake question.
Oh, it's not a fake.
I'm
but
joking,
yeah, okay. 저는 제가 교통사고를 당했을 때 실제로 제 몸을 테스트해본 결과가 있어서 아까 교수님께서 말씀하신 거를 충분히 공감을 합니다. 제가 즐거운 생각을 하면 통증이 없어지고 안 그러면 다시 페인이 오는 그런 경험을 했거든요. 근데 우리가 그 마인드풀한 어떤 상태를 우리가 의식적으로 생각한다면 그거는 일시적으로 굉장히 효과가 있는 것 같은데 이게 지속적으로 하면 이 뇌가 굉장히 피곤할 것 같아요. 그래서 저는 그 호기심이 많고 그래서 보통 때 그런 거를 많이 해보는데 의사한테 얘기를 했더니 너무 피곤할 거다. 이렇게 멍한 상태를 좀 유지할 필요가 있다. 그런 게 참 필요하다 인간에게는. 그래서 그 상태를 어떻게 설명하시는지 그리고 최상의 마인드풀한 상태는 무의식적으로 그것이 체화돼서 하나도 피곤하지 않고 저절로 되는 것이지.
Yeah, basically, So basically, she got a car accident before and car accident.
A car accident.
And before, so she understands some of the pain is like there is a variability in terms of pain, and she also said that our brain needs a rest. How can you constantly pay attention? Because sometimes brain needs a rest. So
no, first of all, our brains don't need a rest from being mindful. What I'm saying to you is when you're at peace and you're smelling the flowers, your brain is not resting, right? Your brain is processing the odor. What you need a rest from is worry. And worry is mindless, not mindful. Mindfulness is just noticing. It's just noticing. It doesn't matter what you're noticing. And it feels good. You don't need a rest from feeling good. Now with a car accident, that's pretty scary, but you see you've recovered. So now you should be less afraid in the future, of different things because you should see that you're stronger than you thought you might have been. We need time out from boredom. We need time out from stress. We don't need time out from being mindful. When we're mindful, we'll be neither bored nor stressed. All right? It's all in the way we talk to ourselves, and which means that we all have enormous control over our health, our happiness, our relationships. Is there one last question? Yeah, right here.
Okay.
Thank you for your speech. I feel like being more positive. Yeah. And you kept mentioning about the uncertainty, but it sounds like nothing is certain.
Right.
So
okay, it's interesting what he's getting at before he says it. Let me tell you, we have this view. How can I be unafraid if everything is uncertain? And what we need to do is make a universal attribution for uncertainty, and I'll explain what I mean in a moment, rather than a personal attribution. Right now, we tend, when we don't know something, to make a personal attribute. I don't know it, it's knowable, I don't want you to find out that I don't know it, so maybe I'll pretend. That's very different from a universal attribution, which is, I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows. Those people who act like they're knowing don't know. And when you recognize that none of us know, not knowing is okay. Right? Not knowing is only scary when you think you have to know. But whether it's scary or it's not scary, that's the state of the world. Everything is always changing. Everything looks different from different perspectives. You just can't know. But if you know that you're in charge of your experience about whatever happens, you don't need to know. So I came in today. I didn't know how many of you were going to be here. I didn't know if any of you would understand or appreciate anything that I would say. I didn't know for sure what Chanmo was going to ask me. I had the pleasure, of meeting Dr. Jeong, but I didn't know whether he was going to ask me something. And notice I had to walk over here to see if I can pronounce his name, and he knew that. But it's okay. Why should I know how to pronounce a Korean name? I'm not Korean. I'm not very good with language, but I can do other things. But I'm honest and authentic. So he doesn't care that I didn't know how to pronounce his name, nor should you. All right, where was I going? Yeah, so I didn't know any of these things. I could have been very scared, right? Say, oh my gosh, I don't know any of you. What if this is an abysmal failure? Or I could have said, oh gosh, I can't tell you how many times I've given talks like this. I have given so many, oh, it's going to be hard to keep myself awake while I'm talking to you. Because I go all around the world, I walk in, there are people, I give the talk, they ask questions, I answer the questions, I go home. Every year I do this several, it's boring. So the point is, I can take the same situation and make it stressful. Oh my God, I don't know any of you. I'm scared to death. Or, yeah, it's just like everything else, and I'm bored to death. So when you're scared, what you need to do is look to see the ways it's familiar. And when you're bored, you look to see the ways it's novel to achieve the, a right amount of excitement. But the idea of getting rid of uncertainty, you can't do. What people now do is confuse the stability of their mindsets with the stability of the underlying phenomenon. When it seems like it's staying still, you're holding it still with your head. And we do this with people all the time, right? We say, you're so sweet, you're so nasty. I'm sorry, it was just where you were sitting. But I'm sure whoever I just said was sweet isn't sweet 100% of the time. The person who's, but we use these blanket statements so we feel we can control it. Sweet, I want to be with you. Nasty, I don't want to be with you. But it's changing. And I started when I talked to you about the symptoms of whatever disease we're going to have. Some subset of us will get these diseases. And it's a mistake to think that the symptoms stay still. It's changing. And if we tune into the changes, we can control some of it. If we tune into the changes in the people that we meet, then we needn't fear them, and so on. So the bottom line is that I think more control comes in recognizing this uncertainty, exploiting the uncertainty. We can't get away from it. All we can do is pretend that it's not there. And then we get caught by surprise. That, oh my goodness, this or that happened.
Okay. The time's up, so we need to wrap up the session now. Thank you very much for the wonderful talk and enthusiastic comments and the answers. I think most of the audience learned a lot about and get a chance to think about the mindfulness. And the bottom line is mindfulness, reduce the stress, right. Increase the sales, and make us happier. Right. And now I think we little bit have a courage to cope with this uncertain, complex society.
Wonderful.
Okay. So
감사합니다.
Yeah. Thanks again with a big applause.
네,
감사합니다. 세션을 마무리하겠습니다.